Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is light. Let's take a look at some of the definitions for this verb. The first way we use the verb light is to mean to provide with light or lighting. Sometimes when we use this, we're meaning to turn on light or the lighting. A second way this verb is used is to mean to make something start burning. This verb is rather unique because there are both regular and irregular forms to it. So we'll start with the easiest one, with the progressive. To make the progressive form, all we need to do is add ing to form lighting. The past tense form of this verb could be spelled L-I-G-H-T-E-D, or it could be pronounced lit, just L-I-T. So lighted or lit. And the same thing happens with the participle form. So we're saying, if we're using the present perfect, for example, right, we could say have lighted or have lit. Now, the thing you should know is that both of these are correct. And there are some really interesting articles that talk about which form has been in usage. So hundreds of years ago, I think you would hear lit. And then in the 1800s, lighted became more popular. And then around 1930, lit again became more widely used in both American English and British English. So you might be more likely to hear people say lit, but you're not wrong if you choose to say lighted. Let's take a look now at some phrasal verbs. You're going to notice it's really the same phrasal verb with just 3 different meanings. So you might hear someone talking about lighting up, and it could have the meaning that someone is starting to smoke a cigarette. Here's that usage in a sentence. He lit up as soon as he got out of the building. So in the United States, in most places, it's not legal to smoke inside. So this is describing someone who, as soon as they put a foot outside the door, they began to smoke. A second meaning for light up is to illuminate. That might be a new word for you, and really that's just making something shine. If we look at that definition, it's going to use the word light as well. So let's take a look at this usage in a sentence. The city lights up the streets at Christmas time. A third way to use the phrasal verb light up is to mean to look very surprised or happy. So when we're using this particular meaning, we are generally looking at somebody's eyes, and if they look like they're excited, surprised, happy, as well as their mouth and their facial expressions. So let's take a look at this usage in a sentence. Sue's face lit up when she heard the news. This must have been generally good news. Let's continue practicing using our verb light in some different verb tenses. Today, we'll look at simple present, present perfect, and simple future. Let's start with simple present. We use this verb tense to talk about habits and routines. We also use it to discuss facts. And the thing to remember is that in the affirmative, if your subject is he, she, or it, so singular people or things, then you're going to add an S to the base verb to make the affirmative tense. If your subject is I, you, we, or they, you just use the base verb. Let's look at an affirmative example. Every Christmas Eve, the family lights candles. And I intentionally use this example because you might be thinking, well, Katie, family, there's generally more than one person in a family. And you're right. But the noun family in this sentence is singular. So that's why I've put an S on the verb. If I want to make negative simple present sentences, if my subject is I, you, we, or they, I'm going to use do, not, and then the base verb. But if my subject is he, she, or it, I'm going to use does not, and then the base verb. You may hear native speakers use the contractions don't or doesn't. Here's an example. They don't light up in front of their children. So you might be wondering, as we look at that, which light up meaning is that? And I would say that's probably the smoking one, right? Maybe they don't want their children to see that they have this particular habit. Perhaps they don't want their children to be around because we know secondhand smoke. So even if you're not the one smoking, but someone near you is, that can have bad effects on your health as well. Next, let's look at making a yes or no question in the simple present. To do this, we're going to start with do or does, then we'll have our subject, and then the base verb. Do you light the fireplace every night? Next, let's look at present perfect. We use this verb tense to talk about an action that has started in the past and continues into the present, or an action that was completed at some unknown point in time in the past. To make an affirmative sentence, we're going to use have or has, depending on our subject, and then the participle form of the verb. You might notice here in my example, I think I tend to use lit as my past tense and participle forms, so that's how I've made my sentences. Again, if you want to use the regular form, lighted, that's fine. Kind of your choice, since we have two options here that are both correct. Let's look at an affirmative sentence. For 32 years, the company's signs have lit up Main Street. So that started in the past, continues into the present. If I want to make a negative present perfect sentence, I'm going to insert not after have or has. You might hear native speakers use the contraction form hasn't or haven't. Let's look at an example sentence. They haven't lit fireworks in many years. Finally, if I want to make a yes or no question in the present perfect, I'm going to start with have or has, then I'll have my subject, and then the participle form of the verb. Here's an example. Has he lit his hair on fire before? Has he lit his hair on fire before? I hope not. Next, let's take a look at simple future. Today, we're going to practice using simple future by using a present form of be, so am, is, or are. Then we'll use going to and the base verb. Let's look at an affirmative example. I'm going to light the candles on the cake. This is that meaning, the last two examples really go back to the meaning of starting to burn. If I want to make a negative simple future sentence using be going to, I'm going to insert not after my be verb. Here's an example sentence. He isn't going to light up because he's quitting smoking. Finally, if I want to make a yes or no question to ask about something that may or may not happen in the future, I can start with a form of be, then I'll have my subject, and then going to and the base verb. Here's an example of that. Is something on the dashboard going to light up? You might think of dashboard as the instrument panel in our cars or automobiles. Next, let's take a look at some words that are related to light. The first word we're going to look at has the exact same spelling and the exact same pronunciation. It's just the noun form. Light could be something natural or artificial that makes things visible. We might think about the sun or lamps. Those are both forms of light. So here's an example of that meaning in a sentence. turn on the lights. Another meaning for this noun is just a shortened way to say traffic light. So so when you're driving, the red, yellow, green lights that hopefully you're paying attention to as you come into intersections. So here's an example of that usage in a sentence. I had to stop at the light. The last meaning that you might hear is a device that makes something start burning. So you might hear this in a question form. If someone asks, do you have a light? Many times they're asking because they want to start smoking. They're not necessarily asking, like, do you have a lamp? Or does that room have some light? Light can also be an adjective. Again, same pronunciation, same spelling. It can have so many different meanings. I've picked out just 6 that I think you may hear or see when you're reading. The first usage for this adjective is having enough natural light. And another way to think of this is not dark. Right? So here's an example. The house is light and airy. This would tell me that there are probably a lot of windows in this particular house, so that it seems bright. It doesn't seem dark. A second way we use this adjective form is to mean pale in color. So here's an example of this. She's wearing a light blue shirt. Right? We know there are different shades of colors, some darker, some lighter. A third way to use this adjective is to mean of little weight. Right? So, not heavy is probably another way to sort of think of this. These boxes are light. Right? These boxes are not heavy. Another adjective meaning for light is relatively low in amount. Here's an example of that. Traffic was light yesterday. This means there were not a lot of cars out on the street. Another way to hear this adjective used is when we're talking about entertainment. So this could be books, movies, TV shows, but we're describing that in entertainment and saying it's not serious. This is not something that's going to make you cry or feel really sad. So here's an example of that usage. This book is a light read. The last adjective form for light could be gentle or delicate. Here's an example of that. She gave him a light pat on the back. Right? So very soft, not a firm or strong pat on the back. The last word we'll look at today is another noun. It's going to connect back to one of the other meanings we looked at already. A lighter, right, is a device that produces a small flame. So earlier, with the noun form of light, I gave you the sentence, do you have a light? Someone could also ask you, do you have a lighter? Right? Those two are going to have the exact same meaning. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.